right. Hello, everybody. Jim Rothermich with Iowa Appraisal, also known as the Land Talker. I've started something new. I've started Land Talker TV, and then this is a format for me to interview auctioneers or farm realtors and go in depth about about their company, market conditions in an area, and upcoming auctions. So today I've got one of the famous guys here in Iowa, Jim Huff of Sullivan Auctioneers. This guy has sold as much farm ground in Iowa as anybody, and just going to talk to him about what he does at Sullivan's and Sullivan Auctioneers and some of their upcoming auctions. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, good to be here, Jim. I'm not real sure about the famous part, but I'm starting to get to have a pretty long career in the auction business. I've been very fortunate to do so, and been really fortunate to sell quite a bit of land in the state of Iowa, and obviously in Missouri and Illinois as well.
So, how long have you been in the auction business, and how did you get started in the auction business?
Well, I went to auction school in 1983, about 11 days after I graduated from high school. And for the most part, not obviously not full time, but for the most part, my entire 40 plus years, I've been somewhat involved in the auction business. I've been full time since 2006, concentrating in the ag world and specifically farm equipment and, specifically land, obviously, and farmland.
Right. And then, so when did you get hooked up with Sullivan Auctioneers and kind of tell me about that?
Well, I started with Sullivan Auctioneers in 2010. Of course, we were doing a lot of live auctions then, which that was predominant, and we can touch on that just a little bit more. Obviously, I think there's no Sullivan Auctioneer, no stranger, obviously, to you and the people in Iowa. It's a family-owned business, 40 plus years, based in Western Illinois, and with a huge presence, throughout the Corn Belt, and the family owned culture and what really attracted me to Sullivan Auctioneers at the time.
Mhm. And you said you went to auctioneer school. Did you go to the auctioneer school in Mason City?
I
A lot of
did.
people went to that
I,
one.
I did. I went there in June of '83 with Gordon Taylor. A lot of people call it the Barracks, which was a old hotel there, and you're pretty well sequestered. He only let you out there about 1 or 2 days out of those 11 or 12 days, so he kind of kept you under lock and key, so to speak. So, which was fine, but probably with me as a 17-year-old young man from extreme southeast Iowa, grew up in Keosauqua, Iowa, and probably really hadn't been out too much, and probably was a good thing to have a little structure when I got up there. That's for darn sure.
So what intrigued you about the auction business? Had you gone to livestock auctions and
Well, yes,
machinery auctions?
my folks specifically went to a lot of auctions. There's and still going there today in Keosauqua, the sale barn there, livestock auction. It's pretty, very prominent down there. Southeast Iowa, they sell a little bit of everything. It's obviously owned by the Gehring family. They do a really good job. They've been there a long time, and I suppose that's probably what attracted me. We went there about every Saturday, for may not stay very long, but went there and got a bite to eat and stuff like that, and kind of attracted me to that. And the obviously the glory of the auctioneer behind the microphone, which has changed obviously significantly today, but I suppose that's probably what attracted me most.
Mhm. And I've always liked listening to auctioneers, but there's no way I could do it. I never had any interest to try to do that crying but I've always enjoyed listening, and there's nothing more enjoyable to listen to a good auctioneer crying an auction.
Well, I'd 100% agree that, and it's not it doesn't come overnight. That's for darn sure. It takes a lot of time behind the microphone. I've been awful fortunate over the years to sit behind the microphone with some pretty high profile deals, and it's certainly been an honor to be able to do some of that for some awfully good people.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a craft, that's for sure. And so, um, just kind of tell me your coverage area for Sullivan's. Do you just can you speak to that?
Are you talking about myself?
Yeah, or what you do at Sullivan's.
I'm predominantly handled the and oversee the real estate auctions in Iowa. They have kind of moved me into that position here just recently, and this, Jim, for a while we had a really, really strong presence in the state of Iowa, and circumstances that happened in the recent past, it kind of lost a little bit of momentum in Iowa. They moved me into that position to refocus on that. Obviously, I think it's coming out, and maybe you're going to touch on it, but I'm going to touch on it now. No strangers to the auction and real estate world. The guys by the name of Tim Meyer and Nate Larson are now on board with Sullivan Auctioneers. Of course, Jeff Hoyer is here. And with the four of us, I think that we can certainly cover the state of Iowa, and we have the knowledge and experience to move Sullivan Auctioneers to the forefront in the auction real estate auction world in Iowa.
Yeah, I had heard Tim Meyer and Nate Larson had joined your team over there and talk about some players. They've got the contacts for sure.
Yes, they do. Yep, they do, and they both have been in the business a number of years, and I think they're pretty well respected, throughout the state, and I think that was a driving force to get them on board with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one thing about Sullivan's, there's two things, two words I can tell you when I think of Sullivan's, and that's integrity and transparency.
Correct.
And that for an auction company, I don't think you can get any better than that. So,
That's always been obviously been a motto, and for at the forefront for not only Sullivan Auctioneers. It's always been that way with myself. I was kind of mentored by a man that most people don't know, but was a Hall of Fame auctioneer out of Keosauqua. His name was Howard Buckles, and that was he was in the auction business, good Lord, probably 50 years or better. And that's what he prided himself on, and that's kind of what I've always prided myself on, as well as all the entire staff here at Sullivan Auctioneers.
sure, sure, sure. You bet, you bet. Now, as far as coverage area, Sullivan's kind of covers the three-state area, but I've also seen auctions they've had in California and Maryland. Can you kind of speak to that, the coverage area and how that
Well,
works?
we've I've had the fortunate fortune to go to Davis, California here several years back with another partner of mine, and we sold a farm out there in that valley out there around Davis, California. It was very, very interesting. If anybody ever has the interest to go out there, and Jim, maybe you've been out there, but you get in around that Sacramento area, you get in the valleys. If you kind of blinked and thought about it, it kind of reminded you a little bit of Iowa, other than they've got almonds instead of corn and soybeans. But this farm was an alfalfa hay. It sold very well, and then we've had some machinery sales out in the eastern shores of Maryland, and again, very interesting. That out there is a lot like the Midwest as well. They raise a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans. And people, if you're not familiar with that, there's a tremendous amount of poultry buildings out there. So those commodities go to those poultry buildings, and they get a premium for them crops out there. And it's really, really interesting out there as well. So I've been really fortunate to experience some of those things. And looking back, when I went to auction school in 1983, I wouldn't have had no idea that I'd ever done that.
Oh, I'm sure. I couldn't imagine, going to each coast like that and then dealing with the different circumstances
Yep.
in those areas. I mean, I don't know anything about California, but do they auction land there mu very much
Very
or how?
little,
Yeah.
very little. We worked with a realtor out there, and they was very receptible to it, but it's just something that they don't do very often out there. And kind of in that valley where that was, it doesn't change hands very often because like I say, most of it, there's some dairies around there, but the most of their deal out there is these almond trees, and so it's just different out there.
Yeah. Yep. 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 And then like in Maryland, that's got to be a different ball game too, as far
They got
as
the same, it basically the same equipment. Yeah, you're dealing with probably a little bit of a different audience as far as locals, but when we were out there, we was already offering online bidding. So, there was people that, some of that equipment had come back to Ohio, and maybe some of it might have come to Missouri or whatever the case might be, because that's just what they do. But a lot of that equipment, if I remember right, stayed locally, but we did have a pretty big online presence out there on them sales we had too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So most of the time, Sullivan's just covers the Missouri, Iowa, Illinois area.
Well, we've got, of course, there's some reps in Indiana, and of course we've got Hensland auctions or auctioneers up there. The Allen Hensland's up there in Minnesota. So we've got a good presence up there as well. We're starting to expand that footprint some more, and I think you're going to see quite a bit of momentum start to build back in with Sullivan Auctioneers here in the coming months. We're really excited about the future here.
Good, 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 good deal. Well, they say the largest transfer of wealth is coming, and so
Yeah.
um,
Well, you can
uh,
believe that for what some of this land's worth. I mean, Dan's in there, and you commented. Dan's in there selling a sale right now in the studio here in Hamilton, Illinois. In Illinois, and sold a couple tracks up there around 17 or north of 17,000. And so if you think about that, it was 120 acres at 17 something. That's quite a bit of money there. That's you build pretty quick wealth and start talking about them figures.
yeah. Well, those heirs to those properties are multimillionaires when they sell those farms. So
That's
it's
accurate. Yes.
amazing what it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. You know that. You bet.
Um, so, uh, so as far as uh, you've got guys that cover certain areas. Is that how that works there with Sullivan's?
Well, as far as the state of Iowa, as far as on the real estate side, us four are going to cover the state as far as
Okay.
that goes. I mean, we booked a sale for October in Hamilton County, and I drove up there last week and flew some quick drone pictures of it just to get it online. I'd be up there. You can be someplace in pretty quick order with the road systems we got, and we need to stay overnight. That's not a problem too. I've done that lot of that too. So we'll go
Yeah.
anywhere in the state. Of course, we'll go anywhere in the country as far as that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've watched you guys for a long time, and COVID caused a lot of change in the way farms are marketed and
Yep.
auctioned and sold. And I always thought you guys were really on top of that. And you guys at one time would have community centers rented out, and you'd auction the farm off, and there would be several of your agents there,
Yep.
belly to belly with a lot of people there
Might, might,
talking.
might might have two or three of them a day, several days.
Right,
You bet. Yep.
right. And then COVID hit. And can
Correct.
can you kind of speak to how things have went from that and evolved to where you're at today?
Well, of course, COVID hit. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, probably about this time in last February in 22, middle of February. And of course, we had several sales booked, not only land auctions, but machinery auctions. And, there for a while, we always thought it wouldn't be long, we'd be back to live auction, but we've kind of moved in the direction, and we sell about all of our land, I guess about 98.5% of it, maybe 100% of it virtually in front of a camera, just like this, actually chanting the sale, just like you commented. Dan's doing that in the studio in front of a camera. You're going to hear me if we get in the right situation in this conversation. You're going to hear me refer back to going to auction school. There's no way in 1983 that I would ever think that I would sell a 20 acres or 40 acres or 200 or 300 acre farm in front of a camera behind a microphone. And if somebody would have told me that, I said, "Oh, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. It's never going to work." Well, it happened, and I'm not going to, I think everybody knows that it ever talked to me that I've ever sat in front of. It really works. And I never would have thought I'd said that if somebody said 5 or 10 years ago, say that. But I think it's good. It's great for the buyer. They can bid in their office, at their kitchen table, comfort of their home. And the seller can come to our office here or studio, watch the sale if they like refreshments. It puts everybody at ease, puts everybody on the same level playing field. And, I think maybe some auctioneers probably think I'm crazy with what I'm going to say, but I think that we as auctioneers, whether we're selling land or we're selling $200,000 tractors, there's an intimidation factor for a potential bidder or buyer that are not professional. They may not go to many sales, may only go to one or two sales a year, or they may only bid on one farm in their lifetime. You got to admit, Jim, you would think that they'd be pretty darn nervous.
Yeah.
And I just think it really, I think it sets a potential buyer at ease, and it really works very, very well.
Yeah. Well, I know, I used to at one time work for a large national real estate company, and
Yes,
they,
sir.
talking, 15 years ago, they were trying the online stuff. It was a new thing, and they tried it. It didn't work very
Mm-hmm.
well. And at that time, they said you can't sell a farm online. It's got to be face to face. That's the only way you can sell a
Yeah.
farm.
Mm-hmm.
And when COVID hit, man, it was crazy how fast things changed and the
Yeah.
technology, everybody had to change or they was going to get left.
Left behind. That's correct.
And so I remember, I keep track of all the land auctions in Iowa. And
Yes,
so
sir.
as I was retrieving results there after COVID, I was like, I'm not sure this is going to work because, I can remember, people saying that these online auctions don't work for land. And I remember, getting those results, and I was talking to an auctioneer, and I was like, I always ask who the buyer is. I don't want the name specifically, but
Right.
just, was it an investor buyer, was it a farmer buyer, local person with area ties or whatever. And he said an Amish guy bought the farm. And when he said that, I was like, well, if an Amish guy can buy a farm online, then anybody
Yep.
can buy a farm
Right.
online. And so I decided then that, those issues that people have with online auctions, every one of them can be resolved, and they have been.
They have been. Yeah. And we sold a 30 or 40 acre Amish farm a few years ago, virtually. And they embraced it. They were fine with it. He was pretty progressive and had a business, had a cell phone, So, again, just like that, just like you said, anybody can overcome. Maybe there might be some type of a challenge or whatever you might say. There's always ways to overcome that if you really want to buy something online or virtual auction. It can be done, whether you get somebody on the phone or get them to the studio or get them in the office or whatever the case is. You can facilitate that. It's not an issue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and at that time, at COVID time, there was people saying some of these older guys don't have smartphones, and
Mm-hmm.
well, the Amish guys at that time probably didn't either, and everybody
Correct.
worked through it. You worked through those problems,
Yeah.
and
Correct.
it seemed like we had to cross that hump at the same time, and it has.
Yeah.
And one thing I've always heard people complain about at a live auction, and you just kind of mentioned it here. People don't want to know everybody that they're bidding. They want to bid with nobody knowing they're bidding.
Correct.
And I've seen people have their phone and being in a live auction and bidding online because they just don't want anybody to know they're bidding.
I have too, and you don't know whether that's just because they just that's not that they maybe not want to hide their identity, but they just don't want maybe they don't want the attention and so on and so forth. And maybe, for whatever the case, they should maybe just be a personal reason. They just don't want anybody knowing their
Yeah,
business or their bidding. If they wouldn't happen to get the farm or something, maybe they didn't want to know that, hey, I seen Joe was bidding on that farm. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? So it just I think it really, in a nutshell, it just kind of puts everybody at ease, whether it's a buyer or a seller. And
yeah. Well,
I think you're going to see more and more momentum gain that direction, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. No, agreed. It gives you an option. You can bid without anybody knowing, and some people that's a big deal too, and
Absolutely.
that fixed that problem. So,
Yeah.
um, one thing that I did a post on social media last week, and somebody mentioned on there this auction company said they only do live auctions. These people that have these online auctions they should only be at the auction to bid. And I think some people, I'm not saying everybody's this way, but there might be a little bit of skepticism that those bids might not be there. What would you say to somebody that would, question whether those bids were there online?
Oh, I think, I would say that you would rest assured that those bids are there. Obviously, for a auction company that their reputation is obviously forefront, you sure don't want to stub your toe, so to speak, and maybe you sure don't want to embarrass the auction company or yourself as an auctioneer. And I would think that would not hope that anybody would do that. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I would, as far as if you're going to bid on a Sullivan sale, you're going to be rest assured that that money's coming in at
That's
the right direction.
Well, that integrity's high there. I know
Right.
that. I just not everybody can be in an auction, so I think that's a way to get more buyers, participants in an auction, and you've got to rely on the integrity of the auction company. And so,
100%.
so
100%.
yeah. What do you think about market conditions? What's your thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, I should be asking you that, but I think this is kind of going to sound kind of maybe not strange, but a little bit different. I think in some areas, I sold a sale in Illinois yesterday that was maybe in a little tougher area, maybe a little tougher farm. It was a little tougher sale. You might have moved that same farm down, and this is kind of a lot of people say the market this and that. It's still driven by where that farm's located, and you know that as well as anybody, Jim. But I think overall, I think I would really wouldn't say that the market is down. I think it's pretty well level. I think you're going to see some farms that are going to surprise people. You think a farm should bring, 9 or 10,000, it brings 12. And, in certain situations, you might see another farm you think ought to bring 7 or 8,000, it brings, 6,800, 7,100. In them situations, it has to do with the piece of real estate you're selling and where it's located at, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe, obviously improvements, whether and how well maintained it is, and if it's got tile. There's so many factors in what drives the market, is what I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's right. This fall, I was, of course, watching the auctions, and there was some farms selling up there in northwest Iowa, north
Yep,
of $20,000 an acre, and I was
yep,
posting those results. And
yep,
one day, one was a bell ringer, like maybe
yep.
22 or 23,000 bucks an acre, and I posted that, and next thing I know, Dan Sullivan was sending me a text and say it ain't just Iowa that's selling these farms,
Right,
and they had sold, I don't know, for like 400 acres that day. All the average was like almost $23,000 an
correct.
acre in Illinois.
Yep,
That was in Illinois,
that's correct. Yep.
and and so I kept watching that market over in Illinois. Boy, they were cranking out those farms north of $20,000 an
Yep.
acre just daily.
Well, and we've got, I hate to say this, we got a lot going on in the world right now. We don't need to talk about that, obviously. But, like I say, and I imagine he's getting about done with them 3 tracks. They were just sold individually. But, that one first track, I was in there bringing 17, 2 or 3. And, I guess that farm, and I haven't seen the farm. I looked at the aerial today and looked at it, had some wind energy income coming on it,
Yep, yep,
and I thought the farm sold good. You could just look at it and say that farm's going to sell really well.
yep,
And I think no matter what, especially in the land market, no matter what's going on in the world, whether it's commodity prices, a fluctuation or whatever, if there's going to be a piece of dirt coming up for sale and it's what somebody can use in their business or fits into their program or location, they're going to bid on it. Somebody's going to bid on it. It's still worth a lot of money.
yep, 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 yep. No, that demand is there, and it seemed like
Yes.
we had a good harvest this year. That kind of help things out. And then it seemed like
100%.
post election, the optimism went up.
Yes,
So,
yes.
um, can you speak to your upcoming auctions? Is there anything you want to talk about your upcoming auctions? I do want to
Well,
say I want to compliment you on your website. I think you have a beautiful
appreciate
website. It's
that.
easy to navigate. Your sale flyers are easy to navigate, and it tells you
Yep,
everything you need to know, almost everything you need to know. But
yep,
can you just
yep.
kind of anything you want to talk about upcoming auctions?
Well, nothing really specifically. We've got several auctions coming up. We got two tomorrow in Illinois. We're looking at a lot of projects, a lot of land in Iowa right now. I think it's going to be coming to market in midsummer to obviously the fall. We've got somewhere around 2,800 acres to sell here coming up in the next 40 to 30 to 60 days or so. Of course, that's in 3 or 4 different states. I think we've got there's a lot of momentum. Obviously, we're still geared to a lot of farm equipment auctions. There's several of those coming up. So, we've got a really large consignment sale coming up the 20 or the 18th next week of March. There's a lot of diversity in that, as well. But, I don't really have anything specifically. We do have that sale up there up in Hamilton County coming up in October. Them farms are bumping it up in the 80 CSR2s, and they got some tile on them and things, and they're really good location south of Stratford up there. So, but we've got several other sales kind of in the works. I guess I would, ask you, I think one thing I would want to talk to you, I think the inventory will start to pick up more and more as we get through the year, because the inventory, it doesn't matter whether it's Sullivan Auctioneers or whoever. I think the inventory on the market availability is considerably less than maybe last year.
Oh,
Can you on
absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
The peak, as far as auction volume, based on my auction data, the peak year was 2022. The state auctioned 150,000 acres, and that's been
yep,
trending lower.
yep,
2023 was lower than 2022, and then 2024 was lower than 2023. And I do auction research every 3 weeks, and I can tell
yep,
you right now, there's not a lot of activity in April, but it typically goes down in
right,
April because of planting season, but
yep.
it'll start picking back up. And according to you, it sounds like it could get pretty active this summer.
I think so. I really
Yeah.
do. I mean, from all the indications that we're getting that we are, I mean, you know, and of course, everybody's different. We've got one rep here in Illinois that specifically likes to sell farms in November. I like to sell farms. I've got a couple, 3 different months that I like to sell. I like to sell farms in June, possibly early July, depending on the year. I always think a farm looks really, really good when them little corn crops are standing up there and them beans and plants and, it's green and everything like that. Of course, then you get into the fall. Anytime after the 1st of September, I like to sell land. So, of course, November's good, but still by that time, as far as a producer, they've got a pretty good idea what they've got setting out there for a crop, so, if an 80 or something comes up next to them, they're going to be interested,
Yeah.
depending obviously how interested, depending on what's standing out there in the rest of their field.
I've had people ask me when is the best time to buy a farm, and my standard answer is when it's for
And it's for
sale.
sale. Bet.
You'd
Yeah.
agree with that, right?
100%. Bet.
Right, because you're only looking at just, 1 or 2% of land coming up for sale.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
better jump
And,
on it
and,
when you get the
we've
opportunity.
said this several times. If there's a farm that joins you or close, I've always said that a lot. It's only going to come up once. You're only going to get one shot.
One
So
shot, that's right.
yeah,
And you better be
if
ready
you
on
have
that
any
day.
interest in it, you better do the best you can and make your biggest effort, because that's all you're going to get.
Yeah, yeah. Just real quick, when you're listening to Dan on your website when he's
Yep.
auctioning, he's always talking about we don't charge buyer fees on
Correct.
auctions. Can you just
Yep.
speak to that real quick?
Well, everybody's got different approaches. I'm not saying what's right or wrong. We just don't like to, specifically on land, it's a pretty big deal. We sure don't like to penalize somebody for, bidding on a farm and then charge them another, whatever, 2%, 3%, 5%, whatever the case is. Again, I'm not criticizing anybody else that might listen to this. Everybody's got to run their business the way they are. We just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And as long as we can hold out from doing that, that's what we'll do. Again, it's a pretty big expense as it is. You're going to spend $1.2 million or $5 or $2 million or $3 million. Kind of, feel it bothers some of us that's been in the business that long to maybe tack on some extra. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. 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 Now I understand. Um, if somebody wants to sell a farm, how do they get a hold of you, Jim? Can you kind of speak to that?
Well, they certainly, the first deal would be to call the office is probably the best. I'm not going to give you my specific cell phone number but you sure can. I mean, somebody wants to write my number down, it's 319-931-9292, but I would urge you just give them a call. Give us a call down here at the office, the headquarters, Sullivan Auctioneers, 844-847-2161. Again, that's 844-847-2161. And you can go to sullivanauctioneers.com and get all that information as well.
Sure, sure, you bet. Well, you have a very good website. And just want to wrap things up here.
Sure.
Anything else you want to say for the good of
Well,
the cause?
the biggest thing I want to say thank you for having me on, Jim. And I really do, as far as I'm concerned, what you do is very, very one of the greatest tools, people in the real estate, whether you're in the private treaty business or like us in the auction business, what you do is very, very helpful as far as us to know what comps are and what the market, it doesn't matter whether you put on there that so-and-so sold a farm in Tama County. It still helps us get a gauge if we're looking at a farm in Southeast Iowa. It's still relative. You can still gauge kind of what the market's doing. And I really personally want to thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate that comment. And I'm like you guys. Transparency is a big deal to me,
Yep,
and knowledge is power. And I think people I keep track of all the land auctions. I post those results on social media. A lot of
yep.
people look at that,
I
and
look at every one you put on there, sir.
yeah.
Sure
And
do. Yep.
so, like I said, not every state's that way. They don't have auctions like we do here in Iowa.
Right,
And
right.
those sales are private, and it's hard to gauge where you're at.
Exactly.
And so it's a big deal. And
Yep,
I've been in the state. I'm originally from Missouri, and they
yep,
didn't have those auctions like we do here in Iowa. And I always thought it was a blessing to have the transparency that we have here in Iowa. So that's kind of why I do what I do.
yep,
I keep track of all the land auctions. I put out a newsletter once a
yep,
month. It goes out first business day of the month. Um, you can sign up for that newsletter at www.iowaappraisal.com. I also provide my sale data to Land Hero, and that is a subscription-based software that you can sign up for, and that's at www.landhero.us. And if you need sale data, current sale data, that's a way to get it. So,
yep. Absolutely.
with that, I'm going to shut things down. Jim, thank you so much for being on my second episode, and we'll talk soon.
I appreciate it, Jim. Have a good day. If you ever need something, as I always say, let me know. Be glad to help you.